quarter gone.
There we are. We are live. Welcome to Shifting from Grudge to Grit, Grace, and Gratitude. And we were just saying that we are pretty tired today, both of us, and we are going to keep it as real as possible. We do want to just extend our apologies to our guest that could not make it here today, and then also to send healing, love, and prayers and light to her as she is going through a challenging, difficult experience with her spouse that is ill, I think, in hospital. Jamila, if that's correct.
Yes, yes. Unfortunately, he's not well, and we wish her everything of the best. And like you say, sending love and prayers to both of them for a speedy recovery for him. Not only is this difficult, obviously, on him, but on the entire family. So our thoughts and prayers are with her during this time. And yes, Anissa, it's just been, I'm thinking about it. Today is the 28th, last year of the month, but only the second month of the year. And I think you and I are both in the space where we've kind of reached a point where we need a break, a well
Yes.
deserved break. And sometimes this may not come in the form of a, a, a getaway or a holiday or whatever it is. But as I was mentioning to you, it can come in these catch up sessions, where you get a chance to just offload the way that you're feeling, have someone on the other end who can relate to it, and just give you that top up, I think, that you need to be able to take on the new month or a new experience or a new challenge and responsibility or whatever it may be. And I'm sure that, we're not the only ones feeling like this.
No, definitely, definitely. I think it's also quite a pivotal time. I think we've got 7 planets aligning today, and you will only see this again in a few. Like, we won't be here to see it again when
No,
this planet's aligning. Yes.
yes, yes, yeah, and that's a lot. I mean, like I've got so many people are just so unsettled, feeling so sad, reflecting on their lives, feeling like they're just not enough, and like yeah, it's just it's not uncommon, and I truly do feel that it's about what's going on around us within our universe.
Yeah,
But
definitely, definitely.
thankfully, we have people around us who we can speak to. Like I have you, and a few other special people in my space who can help get us through this tough time. And even though it may not be the best to experience while you're going through it, it's also something that we have to accept as life, because everything can't be on a high at all times. And in these lulls, I won't call them lulls, in this lull time, it also allows you to appreciate how much you have in your life. It allows you to sit down, whether it's just putting one note down in your gratitude journal. It's that one thing that allows you to keep that energy going until the next day.
True. I mean, I said to you, I just sent you I mean, before we went live, we were like, okay, so what are we going to talk about today? And Jamila said she just sent "Let's keep it real" as a caption with Anissa and Jamila, and I had just sent in the post that I wrote yesterday, and it was so aligned because we were wanting to keep it real. And yeah, I wrote this post which had the question around the weight we carry. How do we lighten the backpacks of life? Because as I wrote here, and I will read it for those that haven't had an opportunity to read the post, just so that it contextualize why I feel this is so apt based on what you've just shared now, Jamila, and just generally, we try to keep the facade that we've got it all together, most people. But actually, when those backpacks are heavy, they're heavy. They are heavy. So we do need to say that they're heavy instead of just trading along as if we can continue carrying them. So, what I wrote here was we all carry invisible backpacks filled with responsibilities, expectations, and emotions. Sometimes, without realizing it, we make our own or others' backpacks unbearably heavy. When that happens, frustration, resentment, and self doubt surface. And if we lack the awareness to unpack what's really beneath these emotions, we get stuck in cycles that strain our relationships. So I'm not going to read the whole post, but where I wanted to take us to and why this was inspired, I sort of lashed out at my 10-year-old yesterday as I got in, rushed to go on to my other live that I did. And after the live, I paused and I was like, but hold on, maybe he's responding in a certain way because maybe his backpack is heavy. And I use this as a metaphor in conversation with my 10-year-old, which then became a springboard for a conversation with my daughter and then my oldest son. And what transpired was I then said, let's just call a family meeting after sunset prayers and let's come and talk about what makes our backpacks heavy, how we choose to make our own backpacks heavy, how we contributing to making one another's backpacks heavy, and then how do we co-create next going forward as a family to sort of lighten the load? Because you said it, life will always happen and the load's always going to get heavier at times, and then other times it's not. But how do we check in with one another and ourselves? How we either contributing to making the load heavy. And let me tell you, Jamila, we're talking real talk. I had to have some realizations thrown back at me because I created the invitation. And the reason why I created the invitation is because, as much as in this household, there's this family dynamic, but there's external influences that will contribute to making the backpack heavy. So I brought in some of those external influences as well. In other words, this idea of co-parenting. So dad, the in-laws, the ex-in-laws, what is their contribution to making the backpack heavy? As much as it was heart touching, it was also heartbreaking
Mm.
because one underestimates the wisdom that kids can bring and the heaviness of the load that they are carrying, and our contribution, even as adults, whether we're parents or not, whether we're teachers or whether we are leaders. I think it's important that we need to, have this topic of discussion around how are we making our backpacks or one another's backpacks heavy? And
Mm.
what do we need to do to create awareness to sort of reduce that? So
Mm.
that's just a little bit of a story on what's been happening in my space. And no, my life is not always perfect. No, it's never always like joyful and blissful. It's balance, it's between it all. But when it does get crazy and really heavy, I feel it's important to speak about it because growing up, I never had a parent to say, hey, let's talk about things here. It was be silent. You need to be seen, not heard. And that's it. So I want you to just share from your perspective what's been in your space. Hello, Ronald.
Hello, Ronald. So lovely to hear from you and have you back on. It's been a while. Yeah, Anissa, I think what you're saying is so valid, especially for the times that we are living in. Where the the case of family family dynamics now, you're having a lot of single parents bringing up children, and that's
Mhm.
completely different to the times that we grew up in. You know, where the majority of, I would say, society grew up in homes with two parents.
Yes,
Nowadays, it's become a lot more common for, single parent homes, and that can bring in a lot of stress and challenges and demands on the parent, whether it's a mom or a dad. Um, and it's difficult to maneuver. It's difficult to handle it. It's difficult to make sure that you know all the balloons, all the balls are up in the air, and not you. You can't get it perfect all the time,
No.
but I think what helps. And I was watching a couple of these um, TikToks with families who sat down and they played this game. We listen and we don't judge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Amazing how many truths were then spoken in that time. And it brought a newfound respect for both the kids as well as the parents. And from a parent perspective, it's so important for you to sit down and allow yourself, your kids, the space to be able to just be truly open and honest with you about what it is that they are going through in their lives and how we add to that, and whether we make it easier for them, whether we lighten the load for them, or whether we make it a little bit more heavier. And most times it's done with the best of intentions in mind, as parents, because we feel that we have to be there as a role model. We need to be there to seemingly look like we're perfect, to be making all the right decisions, etc. And sometimes I think, especially nowadays, in the world that we're living in, our kids need to see us as the human beings that we are, not
That's
with all
spot on.
the labels, not with all the roles and the expectations. And I think in allowing us to be vulnerable in front of them, we give them that gift to be vulnerable as well and to share comfortably in a safe space with us.
I think you hit the nail on the head because it is about how do we create that psychological safety and trust? Because when our backpacks are heavy, again, this is not just limited to parents. I feel so strongly that leaders in organizations that don't create psychological safety, you create apathy, it's a fear-based environment. People just don't feel safe to speak up or to share their opinion or perspective on anything because the environments aren't conducive of that. And what the safe space creates is an opportunity for introspection. It allows us to be curious. It allows us to sort of gather those data points on how we can improve and enhance the environment or the situation or the circumstances or those relationships. And I mean, yes, some of the things that came through last night was not an easy pill to swallow when you are contributing to it. And what I explained to my kids is sometimes there's those triggers, but they come as messages, but we tend to react in a way. So whether it is yelling, like if I don't feel heard or understood and acknowledged, I go into this rage of screaming sometimes at my kids, and I'm being very vulnerable saying this openly. But it's also learned behavior because that's how I was raised. So the cycle is perpetuated until we create the environment that or the invitation to have these open-ended conversations so that we can create consciousness around it. And it's not that we're not conscious, it's just sort of happens so naturally. And I mean, things that came through, whether it was my 10-year-old, 14-year-old, or my almost 18-year-old son, was things around boundaries and respecting space and just having the no judgment and things like abandonment and rejection. These are big things. And I had to explain to my 10-year-old when he explained that one of the things he didn't like was he was still dealing with past negative energy from his previous school experience. Now, that is trauma, right? And it's sitting in our cell memories. How many of us have still not let go of those past experiences? And those traumas and wounds are sitting in our cell memory, and it's translating into the way that we show up and equally to the way that we add into other people's heaviness in their backpacks. So I feel that the interventions are there, but not everyone has access to that Jamila. So, family constellations that you did recently, it's a beautiful, beautiful experience. But what
Mhm.
can we give other than the practical, more easy, accessible routes for people to access to get real and to be vulnerable and to create that safe spaces?
But I think, Anissa, a big part of this is firstly to look at ourselves without any judgment and
Yeah.
to stop placing such, you know, um, heavy loads on ourselves, and to
Mm,
just acknowledge, because I'm sure you felt this, where you know once you've come out of your divorce, whether it was a divorce that you had, whether it was an experience that you had in your childhood where you
mm,
felt like, I'm not going to have this life. I'm not going to live the life that my parents gave me. I'm going to be different. I'm going to make a change in my life. You have all of these expectations placed on you, and goals, and dreams that you wish to see your life turn out as. And
yes.
sometimes it's you become overwhelmed and overcome by it, and you continuously pushing yourself from one goal to the other without giving yourself a chance to breathe, without giving
Mm,
yourself the opportunity to fail. And failure is something that's so important in your life, to make you a better person, to
yeah.
teach you where you've gone wrong, what you could have done better. And so I think that's what we need to do first and foremost, is to look at ourselves with a kindness, with a forgiveness. And
Mm,
yes, you want to achieve so much in your life, and it's fantastic to be ambitious and be goal driven. And you should pursue that, and you should do that 100%. But at the same time, by being kind to yourself, by being forgiving to yourself, and by learning more about who you are. And it is only by doing this, learning what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, and especially our weaknesses, and accepting it as who we are, as a part of who we are. Because
mm,
only once we accept it are we able then to acknowledge it, and to start to change, or to bring in new types of behaviors,
mm,
and qualities that we need in our lives. So for me, I feel that the work has to begin with us for it to benefit those that are around us. And one way of doing that, I feel, that's really been so helpful for me, is to daily do your journaling. Do your journaling, whether it's just something that you sitting and writing thoughts in the day, maybe, something in the morning, evening, whatever it is, even if it's just one thought for the day as to what you're feeling, what you're going through. But there's also lots of these journals of discovery. This one is by Paulo
mm.
Coelho,
Who is
and
that one from?
it's by Paulo Coelho. I'll put it in the
Oh,
notes.
The Alchemist, the one from The Alchemist.
Yes, and the beautiful thing about this is that it teaches you who you are, and it gives you an awareness of the journey that you are on, because a lot of the times we're not aware of our journey at all, because we're so busy doing everything else. We're so busy
Yeah.
being a good employee, or a good employer, want to be the best mother, we want to be the best person that we can be. There's so many different hats that we wear, and we can become engulfed by this, and there's no downtime, there's no time for you to stop. So if you use one of these here, it just helps you on that journey of discovery, of who you actually are. And, simple things like, what do you want most in life or out of life? To reflect on times when the language of enthusiasm and your belief in, or desire for something, you're just bringing awareness to those kind of things. And what I do is I like to write in it in pencil, and then I
Yeah.
revisit it like every quarter or so, and I see how much I've changed from it. But these are all fantastic ways of just keeping in the moment, and keeping that,
Mm.
finger on your heartbeat. And once you're able to do this, you make such a profound effect on other people in your space as well.
And I love what you're saying there because it is no judgment, no attachment, complete acceptance, and taking one step at a time. And for
Mhm.
me, I make it absolutely clear to my kids we are all imperfectly perfect human beings. And one of the things I proposed to them was like, listen, even though we're lightening the backpack right now and we're sharing openly, and there's trust and there's safety, and we feel comfortable being able to share, know that your backpack is going to get heavy again, you know? And know that I said to them, I don't judge you sometimes when you lash out at me. Yes, I may not like it, but I don't judge you, and I'm not even going to be angry at you because I know deep down you're struggling with something. So, it was interesting to see some of the solutions or possibilities of how we could lighten the load for one another, what has come through. And it was beautiful to see that the wisdom that has come through from them. It's let's have quality time with one another, or let's meet each other's love language,
Yes,
or let's respect boundaries and give each other space, or
absolutely.
allow me to be silent. And we underestimate what comes from them. And I am just in awe being able to be taught by them as well. So I make it very clear that we cannot judge ourselves because we're living as imperfectly perfect human beings, and we're on this journey to make that unconscious conscious. And it's never meant to be perfect, because how are we going to grow and expand and reach the next level of our growth if we
Yeah.
don't make mistakes, if we
And
haven't been in the
yeah,
mud of it all?
absolutely, I agree with you. And Anissa, I think, I mean, I'm a mom of one, I just have
Mhm.
one, and you've got three. But I remember growing up, I was the youngest of three. And, I loved writing and I loved journaling and all of that. But they, the age difference between the eldest and the youngest was 7 years. And there was a much
Yes,
smaller age difference between my sister and my brother. So I was kind of the lat lamaki, but, and
yes.
I always felt excluded, um, and yes, okay, I can understand the age difference, but that still wasn't any reason for that feeling of exclusion. I
Mm,
feel that if we had had more of those family meetings or created spaces where we could talk about ourselves and the
yeah.
others listen to who your sibling is, it would have made such a huge difference and impact on. I mean, we're a close family, but it would have been so much more meaningful and beautiful and um, just a deeper connection that we could have had with each other. So I think that's so important for you to continue with, and for
We
you to
are
create that space for each child to be able to share with yourself and their
one
siblings
another. Mm.
who they actually are, flaws and all, and knowing that this is my safe space, this is my safe
And you,
haven.
and you're right there, because there was such vulnerable expressions and shares between them, to one another, because the task I gave them was go and look at, for those that just joined us, and I'll read some messages now, both on Instagram. I'll read it out now shortly because there's some beautiful ones. The message to them was, or the task really was, or the invitation. I don't even want to say it's a task. It was an invitation. For those that just joined, it was an invitation to start taking some introspection around how we make our own bags, our backpacks heavy. So, are we overthinkers? Do we have imposter syndrome? Are we too self-judged? There's too much judgment on ourselves. Everything that we just discussed up until now. What are the things that you fill in your own backpack and making it weigh heavily? Then, between the siblings, I said, go and understand how you are making your siblings and mom and whoever else is in your space outside of our home, making their backpacks heavy. And then vice versa. we looked at how do we make it lighter. So I absolutely gave them the invitation again to decide how often will we do this. And it was, let's do it once a quarter. Does that sit well with everyone? And they said yes, because it's a heavy, it's something heavy to discuss. So it's not
Mm.
something you're going to go do every week or every month, but I think once a quarter means that 4 times in a year, we're sitting down and we're having honest, real, authentic, vulnerable, courageous, bold conversations. And we're saying, let's give one another grace in this so that we could get to that space of gratitude so that we can appreciate one another more. And it's so bizarre. I said last night too, I felt like I was a poet as we were talking and things were just rhyming, and now we're talking about grace and gratitude. And this is what the segment was, why we put this together is we want to move out of the grudge and resentment state, and we want to move to a state of grit, which is not that toxic resilience that Jamila always reminds us of. It's that resilience to endure with no judgment and just to overcome and to rise above. But we can't move into a space of grace and gratitude if we don't have these sort of conversations. There are
Yeah.
many comments. I don't know if you want to start reading.
I just want to bring a point up, what Ronald is saying. Not knowing who you are at home, who are you in the world? And that is so important. And it just brings, it reminds me of my relationship with my brother. And being the youngest, I always looked up, and I always, had the idea that I'm going to have this big brother who is going to protect me and be there for me and look after me. And as I said to you, we never had that opportunity, because it just wasn't the way that families operated in those times, where you'd sit down and have a meeting or anything to that effect. But had we had this, and had he known that this is how I felt, it would have probably given him some sort of, um, you know, a sense of protection for this younger person. And he would have
Yes.
taken on that role model. And unfortunately, my brother, he's late now, but he had a very, very
Mm.
tough time because he was introduced to drugs and alcohol at a very young age because of bad company, and he was never ever able to get his life back on track. And I often sit back and I wonder, if we had that relationship, if we
Yeah.
were closer, if I had known who he truly was, as Ronald says, knowing who you are, because the person at home that you may think sometimes isn't really that person. They show you what they think you want to see, but who they truly are is something else. And I think that we need to start creating those spaces where where we can truly feel our authentic selves and reveal that in a space that should be a safe space. It's the first safe space that we should have in as individuals, as part
Mm.
of a family. That should be our first safe space. And I just would love to know or to encourage that parents do this, whether it's a single parent household, whether it's both parents that are there, whether it's an extended family household. Allow or cultivate that space for the kids to be able to be honest and free and show up truly as who they are as individuals.
I want to just firstly, I want to thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing so openly about your brother, because we do underestimate, and that loss, one never really get over that type of loss, and the grief reemerges. And I'm sure even in this conversation right now, Jamila, there are parts of you that's feeling, how could I have actually influenced it differently? And yes, not with judgment, but that desire to, that could have, would have, should have is always there for us. We humans. So we
Yeah.
are going to feel like, what could I have done differently? But I suppose that is why we're having these conversations. And that is why you are the incredible human being that you are. And the work that you are doing is to cultivate that sort of safe spaces for others, and to bring into awareness and to make that unconscious conscious and to create that beautiful sense of belonging and getting people to understand who their identities are, what are their belief systems, and are they true? Can they be rewritten? That's why you are doing the work that you are doing. And you're constantly hungry to continue on the journey. I mean, you have done so much work on yourself. You're constantly striving to learn more and grow more at version 5.2, I might add. And she still looks so amazing. I do admire that about you is that your deep empathy for others, even on our segment. I'll be honest, I sometimes forget, hey, I need to bring a little bit of empathy and acknowledge what that person just shared. That is a strength that you have, that you are able to say, well, I just want to say, wow, for having gone through that journey, you recognize that for others. So thank you for being vulnerable and for bringing that story because there might be somebody else that's now sitting in exactly that household. It doesn't matter in the era or time frame that we're living in. Some households still carry, and I can tell you for sure, vulnerably in my ex-in-laws household, there's a very old school typical culture of children must be seen and not heard, creating not safe spaces, lots of criticism for the kids, so they're sitting there not really feeling like they belong. So that still exists in present day. So we do have a responsibility, a monumental one at that, to have these conversations, to be vulnerable, to give this as an invitation to others as part of their own journeys. But on that note, I just do want to share some of the comments. I'll start bottom up. And I just want to recognize everyone that is here on Instagram: Samiha, Marissa, Uzu, lovely Lady Osmond, good to see you. Jessica Payne. Jessica is in the field of social work, if I'm not mistaken. We used to be at school together. I haven't seen her for many years. But Jessica, we would love your comment if you are still on in terms of what is happening in this family systems or outside of the family system because these family systems aren't safe. What happens outside of it and how they tend to show up in the workspace, in their social structures, or any other constructs, and which can be improved to avoid these sort of tragedies of somebody losing their life to drugs or suicide or mental health challenges, etc. So I'm going to start reading Ronald's comment. This safe space of transparency and vulnerability helps me recover my inner being, recovering from performance-based acceptance. Oh, we are all guilty of that. Yes, I had to hear last night, and this was unconscious for me because I tell my kids, you don't have to be the best, you just have to do your best. And I never expect them to come with sevens all the time. But yet, when somebody's done well, then I almost expect that to be the standard and I almost hold them to it. So that's very valid because that's that performance based thing that you're talking about. Ashif from Canada, natural or adapted is a hard choice. Couldn't agree more. Ronald says we have said bringing baggage and heavy. We have said bringing baggage and heavy backpacks in marriage. We certainly do. I get what you're saying there. We end up bringing the things of our childhood, our own inner child that has not been nurtured. And I said it to my kids actually last night that when my inner child was wounded or some of those things that weren't nurtured as a child, and I see it showing up now as my adult life, then I tend to projecting it onto them, which is also not fair. So we need to take stock. We really need to take stock. You've mentioned this already, not knowing who you are at home, who you are in the world. We've missed you too, Ronald. We really did. Thank you for the beautiful WhatsApp last night, Ronald. You might be in the States, but we near as on WhatsApp. Ashif says, yes, measure yourself rather than judging yourself. And then this conversation is a growing and awareness as always. Never too old, never too late. Journaling, recovery, reflection, direction. Who are we apart from our roles and responsibilities? That's true. If it doesn't feel good doing it, it will not feel good receiving it, both ways. Dr. Elizabeth, who we had on, nice to see you here. Great discussion, she
Nice to
said.
see you.
We absolutely enjoyed our discussion with you, and hopefully, we'll see you again in the not so distant future or when we run our conference in South Africa. Ronald says when he was going through grief, he wanted to die. Unfortunately, my empathy was undeveloped. But this is based on a prior comment. I told my father I wanted to kill myself, and there was no discussion because they did not know how to show up. And let's not judge our parents for who they were or were not to us, because we have to give them grace based on where they were coming from or how they were raised. Humility is learned from showing and sharing. To your point earlier, we need to set the safe spaces and make this a norm and not like it's abnormal to have these conversations.
Absolutely.
Wow, there's a lot of comments here.
Yeah, my goodness. And it's lovely having everybody back and
Yeah.
engaging in the thing. And I wonder, Anissa, maybe like when we're doing these segments where it's just you and I, maybe we should share the StreamYard link on on the chat.
That's
And
true. And
whoever
whoever wants to pop in,
wants to come in can join us.
I'm going to
Um,
do that right away. So whoever feels called to join us, I'm going to put the StreamYard link in here. That's a very good idea. Just bear with me. I'm going to put it in. I'm going to put it both into Instagram for those that want to join us live.
yeah.
And I'll put it onto the comments here, but no, I can't. That's actually not going to work.
Yeah.
What I do need to
We
do
can
is
put it on the LinkedIn live.
I'll put it on the LinkedIn post,
Yeah.
and then please feel free to join us and be bold to come and share your story and potentially give others that invitation. It is posted.
Yeah, it
Let's
would be
see.
wonderful to have some of our people come on and share their thoughts about the topic and about what it is that lightens or makes your backpack heavier. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Anissa, I think that, we walk around with so many people who have these masks on and their lives appear to be perfect and they
Yes.
seem to be managing everything that they go through, with the utmost of ease. But it's normally those people who show up in that way who are suffering the most from, mental um, well being.
Health. Yes,
And,
yes.
and that's why we become so shocked when we kind of suddenly hear that this person took their life or that person took their life, because you would never ever have thought, because of the mask that people put on. And it's normally to make everyone else around them feel better about themselves. So, as successful as they may seem, as happy as they may seem, as accomplished as they may seem, you truly do not know. And that is why I feel it's so, so important for us to create these spaces at home so that we have our finger on the pulse as to
Mm.
what our kids are going through, and that they're not showing us this facade as well to make comfortable up until a point where they cannot take it anymore. So if we start cultivating this within our own homes, then this will have a ripple effect on our communities. And in doing that, we're able to kind of at least try to manage the issues of suicide and of
Mm.
mental health and well-being.
Yeah, and I have given my kids a language to understand. I've been blessed to be able to be trained in some of the neuroscience stuff and understand some of the cognitive behavioral stuff. So I try to always bring it into an understanding for them. And when I got divorced, I introduced my kids to the language of being in fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or faint. And my 10-year-old remembered that and could tell me yesterday, so mom, when you was doing this or that, that makes me rage, and I sometimes want to be in flight, or I sometimes want to fight. And I think it's sometimes people don't have a language for it, and they don't understand it, and we underestimate, and we think we can't speak to our kids about things. I mean, I said 2 years ago to them a simple thing. I said, if you think about these gas cool drinks like a Coke bottle, and I said, you'll notice they never fall to the top. And I said, see that as this fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or faint experiences that we go through, because if it falls to the top, the gas, it explodes, right? So it overflows then. So he had something that was comfortable for him to say, well, actually, sometimes I'm so angry, I'm raging, and then this happens for me. And it's like I said, it's not the comfortable conversation to be reminded what is your contribution to that explosion happening or that rage happening. But it's just beautiful in the sense of that it creates a closer bond. It
Yes.
creates that raw and realness between family members, that they feel that they can talk. And you may still need, let's face it, sometimes we need external intervention. It can't be us as the parent. And sometimes it could be a friend, it could be a
Mm.
therapist. And it's good to have those. Sorry,
You
I
know,
just want to drink some water.
Anissa, as you speaking of this, I don't think you understand the impact that it's going to have on your son in the future and the life that he's going to have and the relationships that he's going to have, because that's what he's going to bring to the table in his future relationships, whether it's girlfriends along the way, whether it comes to him and eventually when he's married. But this is what you're cultivating this positive exchange and communication in a young child, who one day is going to most probably have a very, very positive, healthy, and successful relationship going forward. So you've now created a different pathway and have changed what you have been used to from that probably is generational, right? Um, because you've done the work, you're doing the work, you're consistently doing the work, and you're changing the way that generations before you have behaved. So,
Mm,
in as much as we go through feeling, oh, I have this responsibility, that in the way my kids are feeling, look also at the positive that you are bringing into your new family dynamic. And I think that's what we tend to ignore or forget, or just want to, let it go over our heads. But it's so important to acknowledge. It's so important for you to acknowledge your journey and how far you've come, and the contributions that you are making now to bringing up healthy, strong, aware young
mm.
men and a young lady.
I'll receive that. Okay, I do. And I'm very grateful because with every challenge or obstacle or roadblock that we are faced, I say to them, the fact that we've recently moved, this was a fresh chapter for us, and a fresh chapter is new beginnings. It's new opportunities, it's new learning, and we continue to learn. So I'm very grateful that they feel comfortable to share with me so openly. That's a gift. They could have
Absolutely.
just said no. Which 18-year-old or 14-year-old, they're teenagers. They don't necessarily want to. The 10-year-old doesn't have a filter and he'll speak more freely. But an
Yeah.
18-year-old and a 14-year-old to come and share here and
And
have their own
especially
level of
after
self-awareness.
something so, like, it's a milestone, right? Changing
Mm,
homes is another milestone, in which is normally brought with a lot of frustration, a lot of anger towards each other. You know how tense the situation can be when you're trying to move from one space to, when the responsibilities are just,
yeah.
bearing you, and the tension can be high within a family dynamic. And for you guys to have gone through that, but to also be in that space where they can come to you and share, and
Mm, mm,
it's not something to be taken lightly. It's
mm.
something that should actually acknowledge and, be ever so grateful for and thankful that you've been able to do this, because without you, it would not happen.
Yeah, yeah. And I even what I say to people outside of my kids' situation, don't see people that trigger you as a negative. See that as a gift, because
Absolutely.
the gift in that is, you, with no judgment, what in that person that triggers you is an opportunity for you to take introspection around where you may be in judgment towards them, and where do you need to release that judgment towards those that are quite harsh. I mean, I'm not going to lie, my kids' reflections to me about their own grandmother and grandfather was so heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking because they still want to see their grandparents. And I said to them, but I have never stopped you from seeing them, but I will also never force you to go if you are not feeling happy or loved or like you belong or safe. So rather than not go into the environment and find alternative ways to connect with your dad if you still want to see your dad. But it's those family dynamics that are not spoken about, that the kids don't know where to have that outlet, or as an adult ourselves, we don't know where to have the outlet if we have bullies at home, bullies in the work front, bullies in our family. And these bullies can seriously cause such bad damage, Jamila,
No,
that
for sure.
remains within the families, that can push family members to drugs and feeling like they don't belong, and mental
Mhm.
health issues and mental breakdowns, and
Or just
sometimes
not feeling
suicidal
good enough.
tendencies. Yes.
Just not feeling good enough, because the bullying can come in so many different forms, Anisa.
And
um, you know, and it's sometimes like, where there's a ridiculous amount of responsibility that family members would place on children, for example,
mhm,
and they might be doing it unconsciously. My son had it, as a young child. After we were divorced, I, made a point of building that relationship with his grandparents and him.
yeah,
And, immediately they would come down on him without even, like, how are you? Things okay? We love you. We miss you. You would
mm,
think that that would be the normal flow of conversation. But the first, um, you know, accusation was, did you call your father? Or did you do this? Or why didn't you do this? And that can have devastating effects on a 6-year-old child, because immediately he feels like he's done something wrong. Immediately he feels like he's not good enough, or he hasn't done the right thing. And it's our responsibility to set that straight, whether it's in a conversation with the grandparents, with all due respect, or whether it's, if that's not an option, then making the child understand to the best of his ability, and obviously keeping their ages in mind, as to what the reality of the situation should be, and what the reality of their responsibilities are, so that you can guide them along, so that they don't take on
mm.
the excessive baggage of other people's backpacks.
But Jamila, so that's a pertinent point. If we take it away from the kids and us as adults, that wounded inner children exists today. Clients that you coach, clients that I coach, couples that come for different type of facilitation opportunities with me, you'll
Yeah.
see some of those inner children that is deeply wounded and trauma that exists within them, and then the projection goes outside of them to their, either their partners, to their managers, to their colleagues, to their siblings.
Yeah.
And these people show up as adults today in the workplace. So we do need to be cognizant around how do we how do we create that awareness in the environments that we have to show up in every day? Can we start pointing out to people what are yours to deal with? What are truly the projections based on your own inner scripting or experiences that has been on repeat? And being a generational or a cycle breaker is by no means easy. You will be seen as the black sheep or the, oh, I
Mm.
don't know what other labels there are, but you will be seen as the one that radically stirs things, speaks up, will not tolerate or accept things, will lead with empathy, but empathy will be misconstrued as something else in whatever form that is for the individuals out there. So,
Yeah.
how do we cultivate this in our work environments? It's
I
massive. I think there's a big problem in those spaces from a leadership perspective and those inner children that are existing in the workplace.
Yeah. You know what I find so encouraging nowadays, especially with corporates, Anissa, is that they are becoming more open to the idea of mindfulness and what mindfulness is, and that it's gone beyond the point of spirituality and all of this woohoo nonsense. But I
Mm-hmm.
think corporates are now shifting where they realize that it is so important to instill wellness programs, mindfulness programs, and make it available to their staff members where they start seeing their employees not just as people who are there to work, but as individuals holistically,
Mm-hmm.
where we start looking at what affects them outside of the office and how that impacts on who the person is that is coming into the office and engaging with those that are around them. You know, there's so many different issues that people have to deal with that come from childhood, but that come from stress, burnout, challenges that they're going through currently in their lives as adults. And like I said, the, I know APSA does a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
R&B does a lot of work. Anglo does a lot of work where they're giving back to their employees, which is unbelievable because this ultimately does have an effect on your bottom line. It has an effect on a corporate's return of investment because if they start investing in their people, which I have seen, which companies like Mindful Revolution offer these workshops almost on a daily basis where there's time for the employees to take, whether it's 15 minutes or 5 minutes or half an hour, 45 minutes or an hour. This is something that is given or offered to the employees by the corporates to make sure that they are in their best
Yes.
spaces, their best mind space, um, making sure that they encourage physical wellness and just being healthy generally all over body, mind, and soul. I
Mhm.
think that we are moving along in that sense. And by doing that, there again, it creates that ripple effect because there's a
Mm.
lot of people who are in corporates who feel this is my only my goal in life. This is what I have to do. I have to be the best at work so that I can provide for my family and I can be ambitious and go from one goal to the next to the next. But it's so much more than that, you as an individual. It's so much
Yeah.
more than just being the best at work. And I think that with the help and the assistance from corporates and many of the human resources departments within these corporates who have the foresight to see how this will benefit. I think that makes a huge difference. And it's not only making the difference within the companies, but each one of these individual employees are going home and then they are displaying and
Mm.
teaching their family members about the importance of this.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I echo that. I have seen a number of companies that are transitioning towards creating sustained transformation and not just having a team building and doing some motivation and inspiration, which is short lived and it dies down. They are getting to the root cause and dealing with the systemic nature of issues. I want to just, in the last 2 minutes, mention from my side, working in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, it's very interesting for me to see and be exposed to different type of programs that are being offered to entrepreneurs. Some are pretty hardcore around the business, the business, the business. Now, I'm sorry, you are not just a business owner. You have multiple roles that you're responsible for. And your wounded inner child and stuff that you're dealing with is still there. So if you feel like an imposter, you're not going to be driving new business acquisitions for yourself because you're sitting with that imposter syndrome. And that's the feeling of not feeling good enough and worthy. In the same way that if you don't know how to communicate effectively and do active listening, that may not have anything to do with your business and getting new business and growing profits, etc. But it's a critical skill to have. Or if you don't know how to remain curious or take risk because you understand you're not failing and there's this perfectionist, that perfectionism was cultivated early on as a child.
Mm,
So I always say that it's interesting to see that even the entrepreneurial programs, they're not all equal because they will have the very much regimented, this is purely business only. And when I have these partnerships, I make it clear this is not just you coming for business coaching. Sure, it's an aspect of it, but what is important that we look at the whole person and have a holistic approach that is fully integrated. That, when we're looking at that person, yes, they're the business owner, but yes, they're also a father or a brother or whatever those roles are. And who are they to themselves? And because often entrepreneurs, I'm an entrepreneur myself, so are you, Jamila, self care is often lost.
mm,
And if we don't take care of self, we lose that self respect in the end.
mm,
And when self respect loses, everything else goes down the drain. So I do think it's also a critical thing to start thinking about how do we then cultivate making those backpacks lighter across all the environments that we faced with and just create that deeper awareness for everyone.
mm. I couldn't
And
agree
that,
more with you. Yeah, I couldn't
hey,
agree, Anissa. Absolutely. And like you say, self care is so integral. It is so, so important because in the absence of self care, you're opening yourself out to burnout.
hmm,
And that can be devastating, and that in itself will set you back, you know and almost erase all of the progress that you've made. So it's so important for people to not underestimate the importance of self-care. And it's not something that you can say, I'll do it tomorrow. It's not something that you should be procrastinating. It should be ingrained within you. It should be seen as something that is absolutely important that I have to do on a daily basis, whether it's
yeah.
taking that 5 minutes in the day, early in the morning, or late at night before you get to bed, but making sure that you make the time for that self care.
We are at the end of our segment this week. As tired as we were, we showed up as heavy as our backpacks felt. We were here. And this, in and of itself, did lighten the backpack for us somewhat.
Absolutely.
It always does. So
Yeah.
I'm always grateful. Yeah, I think that I don't have much more to say other than thank you for showing up. Thank you for the engagement. As always, our usual regulars, Ashif and Ronald. It was nice seeing Dr. Elizabeth here. And we always have some new people joining on Instagram. So thank you for being here. Please share with us your stories and your methods to lighten the backpacks. And if you want to be part of the segment, please reach out to us or post a comment here and we'll send you the Calendly link. And you can book it once a week on Friday, same time every week. Come rain or storm, come if we're ill or heavy in every shape or form, we are here. So thank you from my side. Jamila, last words from you.
Just, one thing to keep in mind, Anissa, is to just take that time out if you need it,
Mm-hmm,
because we're
mm-hmm,
so driven and we want to make sure that all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed and that everything is as perfect as we can make it. But there comes a time where it does become too much, and it's okay to take a time out. Better to take a time out when you feel the need to than for
mm.
it to take you out. So I think that's really, really
Oh,
important for
that's
us to
pretty
keep.
powerful. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Before it takes you out. So on that note, I'm going to end this segment. Thank you for joining. That was very powerful ending.
Thanks, Anissa, and thanks for everyone who's